The fire didn't start loud, it started quietly, hidden behind a wall in one of the upper apartments. A small electrical spark that turned into something bigger, feeding on wires, insulation, wood, growing faster than anyone inside the building realized. By the time the alarm finally went off, it was already too late for a simple evacuation. Smoke filled the hallways, thick and choking, turning visibility into almost nothing. People rushed out of their apartments, confused, disoriented, grabbing whatever they could as panic spread from floor to floor. Outside, sirens screamed as fire trucks arrived, one after another, lights flashing red against the dark sky. Firefighters jumped into action, immediately pulling hoses, shouting commands, moving with urgency. Among them was Marcus Reed, calm, focused, experienced. He had been in situations like this before, buildings worse than this, fires more dangerous than this, but he also knew something most people didn't. Fire doesn't give second chances. Inside the building, chaos had already taken over. People crowded the hallways, coughing, shouting, trying to find exits that were quickly becoming blocked by smoke and debris. Marcus pushed through the front entrance with his team mask on, gear heavy, heat rising fast. Third floor is the worst. Someone shouted. He didn't hesitate. Let's move. They climbed the stairs quickly, each step heavier than the last as heat intensified, the sound of crackling fire growing louder. When they reached the third floor, it was already a nightmare, flames crawling across the ceiling, smoke so thick it burned the eyes, even through the mask, visibility barely a few feet, and people, too many people, frozen, panicking. Not knowing where to go, Marcus stepped forward, immediately taking control. "Everyone listen to me," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Some turned, some didn't. "Follow me to the emergency exit now." He pointed down a side hallway, but hesitation spread just as fast as the fire. A man near the center looked at him, then at another group moving in the opposite direction, uncertainty written all over his face. "Are you sure that's the way?" someone asked. Marcus didn't have time for doubt. "Yes, move." But instead of following, after some people stepped back, whispers started. Fear mixed with something else, something deeper. "I don't know," the same man said, pulling his family closer. Another voice joined in. "Maybe we should go with them," pointing toward a different firefighter on another side of the floor. Except that wasn't a firefighter, just another resident trying to find a way out. Marcus saw it instantly. "That's not an exit," he shouted. But doubt had already taken hold, and in moments like this, doubt can be deadly. Half the group followed Marcus, the other half didn't. They chose a different path, a wrong one. Marcus didn't argue, didn't stop. He led the people who trusted him, moving fast, guiding them through the smoke, staying low, checking doors, keeping them together, step by step toward the emergency stairwell behind them. The situation worsened. The group that went the other way found themselves trapped, a dead-end hallway with windows that wouldn't open, heat rising fast, panic turning into desperation. Back with Marcus, the path was difficult but controlled. He kept his voice steady, his movements precise, helping people down the stairs one by one, making sure no one was left behind. When they reached outside, the cold air hit like relief, people collapsing onto the ground, coughing, crying, some hugging each other, overwhelmed, but Marcus didn't stop. He turned back toward the building immediately. "Where are you going?" one woman cried. "There are still people inside," he said, and without hesitation he ran back in. The heat had intensified, flames spreading faster now, parts of the structure weakening with every second. He pushed through the smoke again, heading toward the area where he knew the others had gone. Then he heard it screaming. Desperate, panicked, he followed the sound, quickly turning the corner and seeing them trapped exactly where he feared they would be. The man who had doubted him earlier stood near the front, his face pale, eyes wide with fear as the heat closed in. "Help us!" someone shouted. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Stay low, follow me now." This time no one questioned him. No one hesitated. Fear had erased doubt completely. He moved fast, guiding them back the way they should have gone before, helping them through thick smoke falling. Debris, every second critical, every step dangerous. Then the building groaned. A deep, cracking sound echoing through the structure. Marcus knew what it meant. "Move faster," he shouted. They pushed forward, barely making it to the stairwell, when part of the ceiling behind them collapsed, sending debris crashing down, cutting off the path they had just escaped. Outside, emergency crews watched as Marcus emerged again, leading the last group out, just seconds before flames burst through the windows of that section. The man who had doubted him earlier stumbled forward, collapsing onto the ground, breathing heavily, his entire body shaking. Marcus pulled off his mask, taking a deep breath, scanning the group quickly, making sure everyone was accounted for. The man looked up at him, his voice barely steady. I didn't listen to you?" Marcus didn't respond right away, just looked at him, then said simply, "You're alive." But the weight of that moment stayed, because they both knew it could have gone very differently. Later that night, as the fire was finally brought under control, the story began to spread. Interviews, footage, accounts from those who had been inside, and one detail kept coming up. The moment people didn't listen, the moment doubt took over, the moment that almost cost lives. Marcus didn't speak much about it when reporters asked. He kept his answers focused on the team, the rescue, the importance of following instructions in emergencies. But the people who were there, They remembered everything. Weeks later, the building stood empty, damaged but not forgotten, and for those who survived, it became something else. A reminder that in moments where every second matters, judgment has no place, because the person you doubt might be the only reason you make it out alive. The fire was over, but the story wasn't. By morning, the burned building stood like a scar in the middle of the street, windows shattered, walls blackened, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air. People gathered behind barricades, watching quietly, some trying to process what had happened, others just curious. News vans lined the road, cameras set up, reporters speaking in serious tones as footage from the night played again and again. Flames tearing through the structure, firefighters moving through chaos, and one moment in particular, a firefighter shouting. People hesitating, then everything collapsing. That clip spread fast, faster than anything else, because it showed something raw. Not just danger, but a decision. Inside a temporary shelter set up for residents, the survivors sat wrapped in blankets, some talking softly, others staring into nothing, trying to make sense of how close they had come. The man who had pulled his family away from Marcus sat in the corner, his hand still shaking slightly, replaying that moment over and over again in his mind, the hesitation, the doubt, the choice, and what came after. His wife sat beside him, silent, her grip tight on his arm, as if letting go might bring the fear back. "I should have listened," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. She didn't respond because there was nothing to say. They both knew. Across the room, others shared similar thoughts. Some admitted it openly, others kept it inside, but the realization was the same. They had almost made the wrong decision, and it could have cost everything. At the fire station, Marcus sat on a bench, still in partial gear exhaustion. Finally catching up to him, his hands resting loosely, his eyes distant, not focused on anything in particular. Another firefighter sat down beside him. "You did good out there," Marcus nodded slightly but didn't say much. Because for him it wasn't about doing good, it was about doing the job. And the job came with something most people didn't see. Moments where people didn't trust you, even when their lives depended on it. Later that day, the department held a briefing, reviewing the incident, discussing response times, decisions made, areas for improvement, everything standard after a major fire. But one part of the discussion stood out: communication, not from firefighters, but from civilians. How do we get people to listen faster? One officer asked. No one had a clear answer. Because the issue wasn't volume, it wasn't clarity, it was something deeper. Something harder to train: trust. Or the lack of it. Back at the shelter, a volunteer approached the man who had doubted Marcus earlier. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you." He looked confused. "Who?" The volunteer nodded toward the entrance. Marcus stood there, calm as always. The man froze for a second before standing up slowly, walking toward him, each step heavier than the last. He started, but the words didn't come easily. Marcus waited. "I didn't trust you," he finally said. Simple, honest, heavy. Marcus looked at him for a moment, then replied quietly, "You weren't the only one that wasn't blame. It was truth." And somehow, that made it harder to hear. The man swallowed hard. "If you didn't come back." He couldn't finish. Marcus nodded slightly. "But I did no anger, no lecture, just fact." And that moment stayed with him longer than anything else. Because it wasn't about being right, it was about what almost went wrong. Days passed, and the investigation into the fire confirmed. It started from faulty wiring, something no one inside could have predicted, but what people could have controlled was how they responded. And that became part of the story too. Media coverage shifted slightly, focusing not just on the fire but on human behavior under pressure. Interviews with survivors, experts discussing decision-making in emergencies, psychologists explaining how fear and bias can influence choices even when lives are at stake. Marcus avoided most interviews, turning down requests, choosing instead to return to work quietly, but one clip still surfaced, taken from a distance. The moment he ran back into the building without hesitation, that clip spread differently. Not as controversy, but as respect. Comments filled with recognition, appreciation, people acknowledging what it takes to run toward danger when others are running away. Weeks later, the damaged building was scheduled for demolition. Safety concerns leaving no other option as machinery moved in. Residents gathered again, watching the place where everything happened slowly come down piece by piece. The man stood there, to his family beside him, silent, reflective. As the structure collapsed into itself, he felt something shift. Relief, not exactly understanding that moment. That decision would stay with him. Not as guilt forever, but as a lesson, one he wouldn't ignore again. Across the street, Marcus watched briefly before turning away, his focus already moving forward to the next call, the next situation, the next moment where decisions would matter again, because for him, this wasn't a one-time story, it was part of a bigger reality. And somewhere else in the city, another alarm would sound, another building, another group of people, another moment where someone would have to decide quickly who to trust, and maybe, because of what happened here, that decision would be different, faster, clearer. And somewhere in that difference, lives would be saved, not just by action, but by understanding that sometimes the person you hesitate to follow is the one who knows the way out.